originating from the podcast studio inside FAM 360's headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. This is the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast. The Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast is designed to encourage, equip, and inspire our audience through a combination of inspirational stories and real-life experiences shared by other successful and skilled leaders in a variety of vocations. We hope that the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast empowers each one of us to step out, step up, and ultimately thrive as leaders. Now here's our host, Mr. Matt Maloney.
Hello, and welcome back to the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Mr. Matt Maloney, and yet again, I am delighted to have my guest, Mr. Mike Woodyshek. Last episode with Mike, we learned about Mike's background. We learned about family sacrifice and lessons that you learned from the observation of your father and with him going through law school and the things that he endured, and as a family that you guys came together on. And most importantly, we learned about really a heartbreaking story that we're going to continue, and the journey that you and your wife and family went through with Colin, and how it played and is playing a pivotal role in how you're leading your life today, and the things that you're doing and stepping out and stepping up and going, what we like to say here on the podcast, going above and beyond and changing lives and changing the world. This episode, we're going to break down with Mike a little bit more and pick up from the story from last time. I think you finished off when we were talking on our our prior episode, how there may have been light at the end of the tunnel. The doctors had said that Colin, there were zero margins on the tumor that they had gotten out. You were getting ready to go home and really go back to school. I think he was getting ready to go back to school. Picking back up.
Yeah.
Continuation of the Colin story, please.
Yeah. So basically, like I said, at that point, I'm feeling guilt. Like I'm thinking we're past this and all these other poor families have to go through this. Mm-hmm. So we go home, He goes back to school. We think everything's fine. I'm picking up my, same hobbies that I had, and it will tie in later, but, my kind of passion, you will, if after my family and, situations with work and stuff is I'm an avid motorcyclist. I'm a Harley rider. I ride across the country. So that's kind of my passion. So I start doing that again. So I go every year to Bike Week in Daytona. My wife's like, oh, Colin's home. Everything's great. Go, in March, go up to your friends, have fun. So I go up for the weekend, with my friends, spend time up there. Come back home. I'm home one day with him, my wife with my mother, my other kids shopping somewhere. And it's just Colin and I at home. So I'm like, hey, buddy, what do you want to do? He used to have he didn't ride a bike, but he had like a three-wheeled, like a scooter, but I forget what you call it.
Yeah, we've got one of those. I know what it is.
Yeah. So, you
move back and forth and it goes.
So I'm on my bike, he's on that. I'm like, hey, let's go. So we go for a couple miles, like all through our community. So we come back and he's pretty beat and he's tired, toward the end, he's like, oh, get tired. And I'm pedaling and I'm pulling him on the thing,
I've been there.
So yeah. And I'm like, hey, it's pretty amazing. This kid, 6 weeks ago, he had this major surgery. This kid's out here doing this with me, We got home and it was weird. A couple days go by and I noticed like he's acting strange again. Like he's not really hungry. So I'm, now I'm the worried parent again. So I hear him in the middle of the night. He's coughing, stuff's going on. So I keep saying to my wife, I don't feel right about this. Something's wrong. And at first she's like, no, I think you're just worried. You're overreacting. It's okay. It's fine. Call the doctor. So I call the doctor. The doctor's reassuring me, no, it's fine. Bring him in a couple, just to keep an eye on him. And I remember the one doctor, I think I called the surgical team in Miami who had done the removal. And the one said to me, and maybe it was a nurse's assistant or someone on the phone. And they said, look, the only thing you have to worry about is if you see his lips turn blue, call 911. Literally that night, my wife and I are in bed. I hear my son wake up in the middle of the night. He's coughing. So I walk in. I'm like, you okay, buddy? And I said, he doesn't converse, right?
Sure.
So he's like kind of, looking at me. And I could tell he's in a little bit of distress. So I'm like, do you want some water? And he's like, yeah. He kind of like nods. I'm like, okay. So then I'm like, you want to come in mom and dad's room? Now, he never really did that. He was the type where he was regimented. So it'd be like, if it was, 8:30, he's walking upstairs in bed, closing turn the lights off. I'm going everything was pattern.
Yeah.
So the fact that he says yes, I'm already like, wait a minute, this is different now because he never really did that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay, he's walking into my bedroom. And I'll never forget, my wife's kind of where you are. He's in between us. He's walking toward. My wife woke up at this point, and this is probably, 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. He looks at my wife, and I remember I just see him, and he just crumpled, just like a rag doll, just collapses on my floor. And I look and his lips are blue. So immediately I just said to my wife, call 911. And I start giving him CPR.
Yeah.
So we're in my bedroom, and we have like a sitting area in our bedroom. There's a couch and a TV, and the bed's over here. So it's a pretty big room. So I'm on the couch with him, and I'm just trying to remember stuff, from childhood and from Boy Scouts and from, so I'm giving him CPR. Then I'm looking at him, and I don't know if it's an issue with his brain. I don't know what's going on, but I know he keeps losing consciousness. So I keep saying stay with me, buddy, stay. And then every couple minutes I'm breathing in. She's on the phone with the paramedics. What ended up happening is the tumor was back 6 weeks later.
6 weeks.
And it was cutting off the air. It was closing his esophagus. He couldn't breathe. So because I kept blowing in, that was keeping him the air. So luckily the EMTs rush in, they throw him over his shoulder, they bring him to a local hospital. So that kind of started round 2, if you will, of the roller coaster we were on for a while.
Yeah.
They tried to extubate him in front of us. Then a couple of days go by, his vitals are all good again. They were only going with what they had. So they're like, we don't know what this is. So they're like, all his vitals are fine. We're going to remove the tube. Maybe he just, aspirated water. He's only got one lung now. That would cause a respiratory issue. That might have been it. Okay. So we're in the room. They bring in the team, the pulmonary team. They're going to pull out the tube. I'll never forget it. My son's looking at me, and he's got this look on his face, almost like in hindsight, it felt like he was like, don't pull the tube out, but he's not saying it. He's got a tube in his mouth, and he doesn't talk anyway.
Right.
But I can see his concern. They pull the tube out and immediately flatline. No air, nothing. So and now it's a struggle. His jaw closes.
Yeah.
So now they got to figure out how to, so then and I get stuck in the room. So that, they try to push you out. I'm in the back of the room. And this whole surgeons, everyone's over your kid, and I'm just standing there stoic, I don't know what to do, And then they're like, you have to leave. I'm like, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm
staying here.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not leaving.
Yeah.
So eventually they get it. They have to put a clamp in. They get the tube back in. So then I said, look, obviously there's an issue here.
Yeah.
Please do a CAT scan. Please do another CAT scan. And they're like, look, the likelihood of that happening, but they're like, fine. They do a CAT scan.
There it is.
So I go back home. My wife stays with him. I'm with and now we were only a mile from our house, this hospital. And it's a small, local hospital. And then they're like, look, it's back. So I said, all right, we'll do what we did last time. We'll call the surgical team in Miami.
Yep.
We'll get him to Miami. We'll get it out. They fly him in. So I'm thinking, okay, here we go. They're just going to go in there. They're going to cut this out. We're good. Meet with the team, and they're like, we can't go in there again. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, well, there's scar tissue. We can't do it. So we got to figure out some other alternative. So we're consulting with multiple teams, and we're trying to figure out what to do. Now, keep in mind, he's on a ventilator at this point.
Yeah, at this point, yeah.
So then it becomes a question of they're like, well, maybe if it grew back that fast, it's beyond what we're capable of handling. Maybe we'll just see if we can get him comfortable, get this stabilized. Maybe we'll put a stent in there or something to keep the airway open, and we'll just send him home. So that's the first time my wife and I were in this long table. I'll never forget, a conference room with all kinds of surgeons and administrative people from the hospital. And they're having this meeting with us where they're basically trying to tell you hey, we're giving up. We're going to do this, this, and this, and that's it. So I remember I sat at the end of the table, and by this point I'd known the team there for a little while because they did the previous surgery. And I'll never forget, I turned to the team and I said, look, I think you all know me well enough now. I'm not the type of person who's going to sit here and say, just accept what you're telling me.
Yeah, of course.
It's not going to happen. That's not, I said, my son's not like that. My wife's not like that. I'm not like that. Yeah. So I'll fight till the bitter end. Yeah. I'll scratch tooth, Right. So the oncologist luckily is like, look, I agree with Mike. We had this plan originally to go through these rounds of chemotherapy. We ditched that plan when we did the removal.
Right.
So let's go back and revisit that plan.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm like, I'm on board with that plan. So they keep him there. We're there for probably, this was in May. We were there till July, and he's on a ventilator. And every day is them wheeling him down. He's got chemo every couple days. There's radiation. They're trying multiple things.
Yeah.
So they're trying everything they can to get it to come down. Then it's like, oh, we think we came down. No, maybe it didn't. And they're looking on a monitor. You need to try to figure it out. So I'm getting increasingly frustrated because I just felt like I need to get him to a place where There's more
expertise.
There's more expertise. There's more available. Everything. There's more therapies. There's more drugs.
Yeah.
And I'm from Boston originally, so I'm like, look, the greatest children's hospitals in the world are Boston, Chicago, New York. So I said, we start making contacts. My wife and I. Luckily, my wife has a friend whose dad was a surgeon at Boston Children's is part of Harvard Medical School.
Yeah.
So I think he might have been at Mass General, but it's all the same network. So we figure out. I talk to the oncology team there. I literally go down into pathology at the hospital in Miami, order them to give me copies of the slides. I physically get the slides sent to Boston so that they can look at the slides. And they're like, hey, we know what he's got. You get him up here. We have a targeted chemo that we're working with. We'll get him on it tomorrow. And I'm sitting on my phone in the lobby of the ICU in Miami, and I'm like looking up things. And I find this company, and to this day, that these guys are amazing. So there's Angel Flight, and then there's Angel Med Flight. Mm-hmm, so these guys were Angel Med Flight. Mm-hmm. I just found them Googling. So I called them up, said, look, here's the situation. I'm trying to get my son out of Miami up here to Boston. Okay, they're like, do you have insurance? Yes. Do you have a caseworker? Yes. Here's all my information. When are you trying to get him out? I said, as soon as possible. They said, all right, well, they take all the information down. They're like, we'll call you back in like an hour. Okay. So they call me back. They're like, Mike, we'll be there at 8 a.m. tomorrow picking up your son. And I'm like, okay, great. What do I need to do? They're like, nothing. We got it all. We got it handled. We'll take care of it. Sure enough, 7:55, those guys rolled in there. They're like, let's go. Grabbed my son, gave me a quick briefing because I'm on the flight with him now because I'm flying with him. Yeah. And they put us on this flight, and it's like a little. I'm not a pilot. I'm not an airline guy, but it's like a little, 6 seats, 3 of them removed. Yeah, there's like basically his bed, the ventilator, the pilot, 2 like EMTs, and me, and I'm in the back, like holding the ventilator machine, while so we have this rough flight up to Boston. And these guys were fantastic, but because of the air pressure, it kept affecting his lungs. They kept having to drop the plane. So the whole time we're on this and it's tiny little plane, and we're like on this roller coaster all the way to Boston. Yeah. So then we get in there. Gosh. Within 9 days, they got him off the ventilator and on targeted chemo. So again, 9 days. So we're like, this is amazing. And again, he's sitting up, he's talking to us. My family's coming to visit. We're up in Boston, so we still have family.
This is so important, just to interject, but so important for as a teaching moment for the audience here to understand that. And I think some people realize this, but not all people. But not all healthcare providers, not all hospitals, not all medical teams are made with the same DNA. No. And getting your child or your spouse or your loved one to the right physician, the right hospital is absolutely critical.
Oh, it's everything. So, literally when I called them, they're like, look, we have the drug. It's across the street. I'll have it here at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Just get your son here and we got this covered. Don't even worry. We'll figure out the insurance later. We just want us to get him here. Yeah. So they get him up, they get him back on. So everything is looking promising, right? They get him on this drug. A couple of weeks go by. They're like, hey, we're seeing the thing shrink. This thing's working. Okay, great. Eventually he ends up coming home. So I drive back from Boston to Florida with my 2 kids. Yeah, something like that. I think it was, he got back home, I think, end of September. Okay. Because I went back with my other 2 kids because they needed to start school. Yep. So my wife stayed with Colin. Then they flew back down. They flew them back down on an air ambulance again, but now he's not on a ventilator. So they flew him back down. Everything's good. So he's home for a couple of weeks again. And, again, we're on that, okay, we think things are going better. Are they really going better? I don't know. The only complication at that point was because he only had 1 lung and now he had aspirated. Collectively, we all had meetings up there in Boston. They put in a feeding tube. So now he's got a feeding tube because he's afraid of aspirating. So now we figure out a way, well, can I inject can I crush up the medicine, put it through the tube? So then he comes home for the next 3 or 4 months. My life is... And we have a 2-story house. So his bedroom's upstairs. We had a big L-shaped couch in our living room. It got too hard to walk him upstairs because we have the feeding machine. Yeah. We've got an oxygen monitor. Yeah. So he's got, I have all this apparatus. So I'm like, I'll just stay downstairs with him. It's this giant couch. He'll sleep on one side, I'll sleep in there. So he and I just slept there. And then what I started doing is because of the autism, if he saw me administer his medicine, he'd look at me and just the sensation, he'd throw it up instantly. So I said to my wife, I called the doctors. I said, look, here's my idea. What if I administer it when he's asleep? not going to know. It's going to I'll just go slow.
Slow, yeah.
So that's what I started doing. So I started doing that for like maybe a month, a little more than a month. And so like he'd fall asleep.
It's a great idea.
But yeah. And then I'd sit there behind the couch with the syringe and I'm pushing it through so we did that for a while. So then, I get a call one day, they're doing updated testing. He's built up a resistance now to this drug. So they're like, there's no sense in you continuing to do this. It's not doing anything. It's just making him upset, so forth. So then the local team is like, and West Palm at this point is like, we're kind of out of options. You know what I mean? We could try to go backwards and put him on a previous drug and maybe it'll spark something, but we don't know. We're going to try what we can. So as usual, per my personality, I'm like, okay, but I'm not going to accept that answer. So we're going to figure out something else. So I called Boston again and said, look, I'll come back up there if I have to. We'll live up there if I have to, but I got to figure this out. So I remember we got on the flight at the private airport in Palm Beach, and there's different two technicians that are on the flight with us. And I remember my wife went with me that time. So it was my wife and I, my son, and the two technicians, the pilot. And they were like, we got talking or whatever. And the one pilot goes, wait a minute. Is this Colin? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, we heard about the story where you guys came up to Boston and they had to keep he's like, that, people were saying it was amazing how the kid could survive that trek.
Wow.
The first time where we're up and down and up and down, So they're like, I didn't know that was you guys. And I'm like, yeah, that was me and, and him. We come up together. So they're like, he looks pretty good. So I'm like, yeah, they thought he was going to be like this, terminal look, and he didn't look like that.
Yeah.
So we go back up to Boston. We're there like 2 weeks and they're doing testing and the team there is like, hey, look, he looks pretty good. So then they're like, maybe we'll try to switch the feeding tube to put in another kind of tube. Maybe that'll be better for him. And then it just ended up, he just started having more and more difficulties. And then in the end, they admitted him back to the ICU. And then they started with the meetings again where like, hey, look, we're kind of at a point where we don't know what to do. We're going to try this, but time is not on our side. And so in the end, it ended up there was actually multiple tumors by that point that had started growing, and then it basically stopped his heart. Like it was cutting off the blood supply. Yeah. So he ended up passing away on St. Patrick's Day in 2017. Yeah. So for me, almost immediately, my initial thought was like, look, we went through all of this with him for all of these years between the autism and this cancer struggle for like whatever it was, 14, 15 months. So I said, look, this had to be for something. You know what I mean? I was trying to search for some kind of meaning. I'm like, it had to be for something. I got to be able to spin this somehow that helps me wrap my head around what we just went through. And for me, like I said, that thought of seeing all those kids in that room that time really just struck me. And both my wife and I said, look, we have to do something, to be able to help people that went through what we went through. So, at least try to make their burden a little easier. And I want to do something where his memory is still around. Yeah. So almost immediately we thought about
it. Drives you. I mean, that is part of why you obviously started this foundation.
Yeah. Right? And that's what it was. I said, look, what can we do that will help kids, and what can we do that, will keep his memory sort of alive, if you will. But because of that, after he passed away, I said to my wife, look, people wanted to donate money, right? Well, the people wanted to send stuff to us. And I said, look, don't send stuff to my wife and I. Just give it to the school where he went to school. I said, those kids need help, We were talking with the school because these donations are now getting sent in Colin's honor to the school. So I said, look, why don't we maybe talk to the school about doing something, for Colin. So we met with them. They came up with the idea.
This is the Palm Beach School for Autism.
The Palm Beach School for Autism, correct. Right. So I said, look, Diane and I were talking about starting a foundation, starting to do I'd like to, be able to include autism stuff as well as, kids fighting cancer, two things that he struggled with. I want to make it about him. And they said, look, they had just built this new school, as I mentioned, right? They said, look, we're going to build a technology center in the school. So basically they said, look, what if we start what if we use the foundation you guys started to fund this new technology program? And I said, look, can we name it after Colin? They said, absolutely. So it kind of worked out perfect timing.
That's amazing. That's great.
It kind of grew into the school because so many kids are getting diagnosed. They needed the space for actual classroom space. So then it became a discussion of, hey, well, wait, what if we help you guys raise money through our foundation to just build a technology program for the whole school? So it started originally, it was going to be a technology center. Then it was, let's do a technology program. And it originally started what we funded last year, which was they have a thing called Project Next, which is the kids post-high school. They built a whole hotel room suite, showed the kids how to work in hospitality. So there's a laundry room, there's a hotel suite.
That's incredible. That's great.
Then a restaurant came in and built a commercial kitchen to teach the kids how to work in the restaurant industry. So they
how to cook, how to do whatever it might be.
Exactly. And then they're like, and we'll have you guys do the technology center so the kids can learn how to, do programming and different kinds of things. So that's where it started. And then, the original goal, I think, was we were going to raise $25,000 to fund that program. And last year, we raised $25,000. My wife, he wasn't working at the time. We have a vested interest in this school succeeding.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts about you going to work at the school? Now, I didn't necessarily mean as a teacher. I just meant in some capacity, whether it be administrative. I didn't know. I couldn't do it. Yeah. I go back to that school now. I even think about it. I get like misty-eyed. I get tears. I see those kids. All I can see is my son. Yeah. It's really hard.
It's too emotional for you.
So the fact that she can do that every day, and she's done it. She's been there a couple of years now, and she loves it. So she started as a teacher's assistant. Now she's an actual teacher.
Yeah. But this is part of her journey. I mean, this is part of her journey of, and for her, part of her journey of healing. Yeah. Right. I mean, and obviously it's tied. It gives her that intimacy and closeness. For you, it still makes you misty-eyed, whatnot. And that I'm sure maybe for her too. But I mean, I think that for her somehow subconsciously, it brings her closer into that story and relationship with her son. Yeah. With your son.
Yeah.
This is an incredible story, inspirational. I mean, if our audience isn't inspired by this, I don't know what you can be inspired by, because I think that ultimately, at some point, every man, meaning man and woman, ask themselves, what am I here for? Why am I on this earth, right? What is it that I'm here for? And sometimes we have to go through, and we do go through adversity. You went through the ultimate tragic loss of your son that has now led you, though, to really step up and step out and create this foundation, and then your partnership with the Palm Beach School for Autism. I just commend you. There's a quote here that kind of resonated with me, and I wanted to say it. It's from Lou Holt. It says, "Show me someone who has done something worthwhile, and I'll show you someone who has overcome adversity." The adversity and the heartache that you and your wife and family went through, and now what you're doing, it's a job well done. It's more than worthwhile. It's life-changing. So the name of the foundation, what's the website?
Yeah, so it's Be Colin Strong, the letter B, becolinstrong.com. And I think on the website, I think we have there's pictures on there. There's the kind of story again, if you will, and there's a way to donate. We hold events during the year. I
mean, I know you do a big bike ride across America.
Correct.
And you raise money for it. That's your big event every year.
Correct. Yeah. So that started as I just wanted to be part of that to help, and I had nothing to do with my own foundation. Yeah. So a friend of mine, my good friend Fred, he started Bikers Against Bullies USA. I started going on their ride annually to Sturgis. All of that money goes to charity. We all pay our own expenses across country. Yeah. All of it goes to the charity, and we raise money as we go. So I did that the first couple of years with them, and then I started doing a local ride in Florida for my son's memory.
Mike, thanks for sharing this. I want to finish with a quote, and I want to say one other thing. This quote from Ernest Yeboah, I think I pronounced that right. "There's never been any great person who never met great trials and oppositions, but their patience, tenacity, endurance, and perseverance saw them to the end as great people." And you and your wife and the people that you are impacting, the lives you're impacting through this heartbreaking story with your son, Colin. But just know that you guys are changing the world. You're changing lives through the things that you're doing. And I commend you for that. And that is really your purpose. That's your calling. And I'm sorry that you had to go through what you went through with Colin, but it really is bigger than you. It's bigger than all of us.
Agreed.
So Mike, thank you for joining today and sharing stories of your journey.
Thank you.
To all the subscribers and listeners in podcast land, I hope today's episode was both empowering and inspirational. Until the next episode, I pray that our daily journeys are filled with opportunity to lift others up and inspire one another as we aim to go above and beyond. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Mike.